What is up, guys? It is DMG here, and today we are going to be going over some tactics and some of the better formations in FIFA 20 thus far, at least ones that I found to be very, very effective. So, what we're going to do is again going over some formations and then tactics, and this is the team that I've been using, and it's a pretty basic starter team. I will say most of them are pack pulled. The only ones that are not are these PSG guys right here. So it's going to be Bernat, Herrera, and then Draxler. Those are the guys who are not pack pulled. Everyone else, I believe, is pack pulled. And I mean, it's not a bad team overall. Obviously, I think I can make some improvements, especially with just kind of the left side. However, I will say that this guy, Henry Onekuru, I think is how you pronounce it, probably my favorite player thus far throughout FIFA 20. And I've only played a handful of games, but easily my favorite player thus far. But that's not really what we're here for. We're here for formations and tactics. So this is not the formation that I use. This is just what I use to get chemistry. So what I do is I have two formations that I found that I really, really like, and that's the 4-1-2-1-2 narrow and then the 4-2-3-1 wide, right? And, you know, I've tried the 4-2-3-1 narrow. That used to be a favorite formation of mine. FIFA 18, FIFA 19, I ran with that constantly. It was something I always came back to if a new formation I was trying just wasn't holding up. I would always go back to the 4-2-3-1 narrow. However, this year I've just felt it's been lacking a little bit of something. Now I might go back to it and try it out again, but in this moment in time, I'm using again the 4-1-2-1-2 narrow and the 4-2-3-1 wide. Now I use them in different circumstances. And you know, I tend to change it up to obviously depending on what my opponent is doing, or what the score of the game is, or you know what my mentality is. So what I normally do is I go 4-1-2-1-2 narrow, starting out the game. That's usually what I just change to automatically, and that's also my attacking formation. Right, that's the formation I go to when I'm attacking. If I'm a little bit more defensive, or if I need to be a little bit more defensive, I need some more defensive support because my opponent is very good at attacking. Or let's say, you know, I'm up 2-0, up 3-0, and it's been, you know, while I'm up 2-0, my opponent's been attacking really well, and maybe I got pretty lucky with the goals, you know, then I'm going to go a little bit more defensive with the 4-2-3-1 wide. So we'll start with the 4-1-2-1-2 narrow. And this is what I'm using as well. So we have Onekuru and Voland at striker, Sancho at cam, Herrera, Laner, I believe is how you pronounce it, and then Draxler in the midfield as well. And then Bernat, two of the Leipzig boys in the defense. We have Pavlenka in goal, and I believe it's Laner at right back. Now, the reason I like this formation for attacking is because one, you have a lot more opportunities to do 1-2s. The fact that acceleration and pace is back this year, but you know, more of an emphasis on acceleration, you can really burst by players, especially ones who are still kind of using AI defending, ones who maybe aren't as good as defending, or ones that put, you know, a defender out of position. Players with good acceleration or just good pace in general will really put the defense in their place, essentially. And that's what you can do with this formation because you have a lot of supporting players, at least the way how I play, right? You know, the reason I like this formation is, you know, for a number of reasons, but one obviously is because, like I just mentioned, you can do a lot of 1-2s, and that's because of the two strikers and the cam, right? You essentially always have three attackers because I have obviously two strikers, but then the center attacking mid is on stay forward, I believe. We'll take a look at his tactics there. So we'll go to tactics, player instructions, and yes, so our center attacking mid is on stay forward. So again, like I said, you have a lot more opportunities to do those 1-2s because essentially you have three attackers here. I have one of these center mids, the more kind of box to box or more defensive center mid on stay back, as well as a defensive mid as well. But the other center mid I just have on balanced everything. The more attacking or the less defending center mid of the two center mids here is going to be just on balanced everything. So essentially, you know, you always have three attackers, but then you're also going to have a very supporting center mid there, right? And that's not to say the other center mid won't support. It's not to say the defensive mid won't support, but you know, if you're on a counter attack, you're always going to have these three guys, and most of the time you're also going to have the more attacking center mid. So like I said, you can do more of those 1-2s, and obviously this is not the only formation with it. This is just the one that I've used a lot in the past, as I'm sure a lot of people have in the past. So 4-3-1-2 would most likely be good as well, because again, you do have that cam, you do have those two strikers. Essentially anything with two strikers and a center attacking mid you can have on stay forward, those formations are going to be good, because again, you have that emphasis with this year on FIFA, you do have the emphasis on pace and acceleration, and you can use these 1-2s here with these three attacking players for getting past your defenders, right? So that's essentially why I personally like it attacking wise. Plus again, you do have a very good supporting center mid, while you also do have a more deep lying defensive mid, obviously, and then another kind of box to box center mid. Also to keep in mind here, I do have the left and right backs, I believe, on just overlap. We'll take a look at the instructions. So the right back, yep, just on overlap. Left back also just on overlap. I do not have them on stay back while attacking, because this is a very, very narrow formation, right? We need that width, right? So yes, you are going to be more susceptible to counterattacks, but again, this is my formation that I use when I'm attacking, right? If I need to score a goal, or just at the start of the game when my mentality is to attack rather than defend, I don't want my left and right backs to stay back. I do obviously want them to get back, but I mean, I need that width that they can provide, right? It adds a whole new element for the attack, and it draws defenders away. So I really like when they overlap as well, instead of just staying back while attacking. Now, I wouldn't use this formation while I was defending necessarily, because again, it's a very attacking formation. You only have one defensive mid compared to two in the 4-2-3-1 narrow, 4-2-3-1 wide. But let's say I was defending with this formation, or would have a defending mentality, I would have the left and right backs on stay back while attacking, right? But again, in this case, since we are kind of in that attacking mentality, we are just going to have them on overlap, and that is it. I mentioned the center defensive mid is just going to be on stay back while attacking, cover center as well. I have tried the new drop between defenders. I'm not a fan of it so far, just because it's good defensively, but they do not add any support whatsoever for the attack, right? Now, it could be changed a little bit. I haven't tried it in the 4-1-2-1-2 narrow, only in the 4-2-3-1 narrow and the 4-2-3-1 wide. So I might try it up, but in the meantime, I like it on just cover center, stay back while attacking, and cut passing lanes. That's what's good. That's been good for me. That's what I like. For the again, the more box-to-box center mid, stay back while attacking, cover center. Again, the other center attacking mid is more attacking, just unbalanced everything, and everything else we've talked about. Now, for the tactics in this formation, it's going to be very similar to the ones that are actually more defensive, right? Or at least the one that is 4-2-3-1 wide, which is again a little bit more defensive, right? So the width for defensive is going to be 5, depth is going to be 6. We are on drop back. For offensive style, it's going to be balanced. The width is going to be 6th. Again, it is a little bit more narrow. We do want the left and right backs, if they were to attack, obviously on the wings. Plus, I do think that if it is a little bit more of a narrow formation, you just need to add a little bit more width, right? We do have two strikers and a center attacking mid who are always going to be in each other's space, who are always going to be kind of, not necessarily right next to each other, but they're always going to be around each other, right? Because, again, they're trying to play off each other so we can get those passes forward so we can attack. So adding that a little bit of width, I feel like kind of separates them a little bit, so that it's not as crowded in the middle. At least that's how I feel. Players in the box is 4. You could get that down to 3 if you would want. It's completely up to you guys. I use 3 or 4. It just kind of depends on what's going on. If I feel as though I'm going to get really heavily countered really early on, I'm probably going to go to 3, just because, again, not as many people are pushing forward. Corners, I just do 2, and then free kicks, I always do 1, just because I don't really like doing, sending the ball in for a free kick. I'm not a huge fan of it. So I'd rather just kind of everyone be in their normal spot. We kind of get their game restarted where everyone is in their normal position, at least most of the time. So again, that is going to be the 4-1-2-1-2 narrow, which is again more of the attacking mentality, which is again also what I'd use to start out in the game. For the 4-2-3-1 wide formation, again the ones with the left and right mids instead of the 3 center attacking mids. This is how I line up. I mean, it's pretty, I would say, pretty self-explanatory based on the team that I have. So if we go to tactics here, right? So again, it's on drop back. It's on 5 width. It's on 6 depth. That's going to be the same. Pretty much the only difference here is going to be the width. So I've mentioned it with the narrow formation. If you have more of a narrow formation, I tend to go a little bit more width. If you have a wide formation, I tend to go a little bit more narrow width. So again, for the 4-1-2-1-2 narrow, I had 6 width. For the 4-2-3-1 wide, since we do have left and right mids, right? So since we already do have some width, I'm going to go a little bit more narrow, right? So with the 4-2-3-1 narrow, the reason I didn't like it was because it felt like it was too crowded. So I could adjust it to make it a little bit more wider. However, then it felt like they were playing as wingers. They weren't a little bit, they weren't as central as they should be. And then if I just had normal width in the 4-2-3-1 narrow, then they would be too narrow. That's how I felt. So in the 4-2-3-1 narrow, or in the 4-2-3-1 wide, I do like the 4 width because again, you start out wide, but then they kind of crash in near the attack, right? Which is personally what I like, right? So instead of kind of going into the attack and then spreading out, which is kind of what they did in the 4-2-3-1 narrow, it kind of starts out wide and then it comes narrow, right? And along with that, I also have my left and right mids on cut inside, which we'll talk about once we get to player instructions. But again, everything else is pretty much the same. For players in the box, I do have 4. I would not really recommend 3, just because you really only have your striker and center attacking mid who are kind of attacking, right? The left and right mids are midfielders, right? You obviously have 2 defensive mids as well. So you have a striker who's truly the only actual attacker, right? Center attacking mid is technically a midfielder, but we do have him on attack, so you could consider him an attacker, but again, that's only 2, right? So you don't really have a lot of support there. So I would recommend doing 4, just so then you do have a little bit more support. So then we'll go to, again, player instructions. For the striker, I just have him on balanced everything. I realized that if I have him on push forward or stay forward and then getting behind, then he kind of isolates himself. And again, obviously we can't do that since he is the only true attacker in the team. For the center attacking mid, we have him on stay forward, so then he can try to add some support to the striker. Left and right mids, cut inside. For both of them, I did have them on get in behind, but then again, they seem to act a little bit more like wingers because they would get a little bit too far forward. So in this case, they would have a little bit more support at left and right mid, and then they would crash in where I would hopefully want them to. At least they do that more often than not, and that could say more about the players themselves rather than the instructions, but at least I like to think it's more about the instructions rather than the players. For the center defensive mids, to cover center, stay back while attacking, cut passing lanes for both of them. I mentioned it for the center defensive mid in the 4-1-2-1-2 narrow, right? I'm not a huge fan of drop between defenders. At least I wasn't in the 4-2-3-1 formations. So again, we just have it on stay back while attacking, cover center and cut passing lanes, and again, that's going to be on both of them. For the left and right backs, we just have them on stay back while attacking and overlap as well. Again, this is a formation that is going to be a little bit more kind of a defensive-minded formation for me, right? It's not necessarily something that, I will only do if I'm winning 2-0 or something I will only do if I feel like the opponent is, really good at attacking. I need more defensive support. Sometimes the 4-2-3-1 wider works really well against certain formations, right? I believe it did well. I think it does well against the 4-2-3-1 narrow. I believe that's at least in my past experiences. I think it's either this formation or the 4-2-3-1 narrow does well against the 4-4-2 or vice versa. It's something like that, but again, I do know that it does well against, certain formations do well against other formations, right? And, if you recognize that, you're obviously going to switch to that formation, or at least you should switch to that formation, regardless of the scoreline. So again, even though this is my more defensive formation, right, I probably will switch to it if I'm winning 2-0. It's late on. I probably will switch to the 4-2-3-1 wide. However, again, if my opponent is doing something that I feel like, okay, if I switch to the 4-2-3-1 wide, I'll do well against them, then I'm going to do that, right? So it's not just about your mentality. It's not just about whether you want to attack or you want to defend. It's also about what your opponent's doing, how your opponent is playing, what they're doing. If they're a little bit more attacking, right? If they are vulnerable to maybe counterattacks, something like that, then I might just switch to this immediately, even if I'm, losing 1-0 or it's tied 0-0, just so that I can, catch them on the counter or, do something so then I can get an advantage, right? It's not just about attacking or defending for you. You obviously have to react to what your opponent is doing. But in general, that is what I do in terms of the formation if I want to attack or defend, right? Attacking, again, 4-1-2-1-2 narrow. Defending is going to be 4-2-3-1 wide. So I believe that is it for all that I wanted to talk about. If you do have any questions, let me know. But like I said, these two formations, right? The 4-1-2-1-2 narrow, 4-2-3-1 wide, those two formations have been very, very good for me thus far. Again, I've tried the 4-2-3-1 narrow. It wasn't a huge success for me. Tried the false 9 for a little bit because I ended FIFA 19 with it, and it's been okay. It's been very hit or miss. It either works wonders, and it's fantastic. I make the guy rage quit, or I get my ass handed to me. So it's kind of one way or the other. So I've had a lot more success and a lot more consistency with the 4-1-2-1-2 narrow and the 4-2-3-1 wide. So again, I would recommend those. In terms of, I actually will say this real quick. In terms of the players that you want in those positions, you know, you kind of want more of a box-to-box for one of the center mids. You do want, you know, obviously I would say a medium-high or medium-medium player at defensive mid, so then you don't have him running forward, which is actually why, even though Ander Herrera is better at defending and has better physical, he has high work rates. That's why I don't put him at defensive mid. You do need some pace in the attack just because that's what this year's meta is. And then quickly looking at the 4-2-3-1 wide, I will say real quick, your best players in this formation have to be your striker and your center attacking mid. Right? They have to be your striker and your center attacking mid. They have to be what you invest your coins in the most in this formation. These two positions specifically, right? That's not to say you have to. It's not to say you skimp out on other positions, but these two, I would say, are probably the most important positions on the field in the 4-2-3-1 wide. Just because a lot, like most of the attack is going to go through these two guys, so they have to be on their top game. You have to have some of the best cards to do that. But I think that's going to be it, like I said. So we talked about tactics, instructions, kind of certain players. We touched upon certain players to buy, and certain player types to get in these positions, in these formations. Again, we just kind of touched down upon it. We didn't actually go over it a whole lot. So if you do have any questions over it, or if you do have any questions over tactics or instructions, let me know. But that is going to be it. Thank you guys so much for watching. This has been DMG.